First of all, okay.
They look too beautiful to eat.
Please sit here, madam. And I know you're thirsty.
Thank you.
Yes, please. And sir,
Yeah.
because I've done my measurement. This is for you, sir. And this is for you. I want you
Oh,
to.
thank you.
I've done the measurement already. You sit here with me.
Yeah.
I'll sit here with me. I'll sit here.
Yeah.
So just gonna come closer.
Yeah.
Until I get the mark.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. So thank you. So
Is it possible to have Lorena as well, maybe?
He'll
Or not
interview me
really?
afterwards.
Ah, okay, okay. Oh no.
Yes, because of the cameras.
It's very small. Okay,
Because I'm
don't
his
worry.
PR director, I'm his best PR.
Don't worry, don't worry.
Because I tried, because unless the position is different than
I understand. Don't worry.
Okay, so two simple rules. Very simple. I will introduce you first, and after that, just look at the camera.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'll turn to you, and then we just begin our conversation.
Okay.
You don't have to look at the camera.
Okay.
But do it through your voice. And I like this place because the sound is conducive, so it's good.
Okay.
Do I pronounce as Mr. Mauro Perucchetti?
Yeah. Perucchetti.
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 Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like if it was K.
Oh.
No, it is written right.
No. I need to, for my
Ah, yeah,
pronunciation.
yeah. Exactly. In Italian, we don't have K. We don't use K. So C and
Perucchetti.
H becomes
Sorry.
K.
Oh, sorry. Perucchetti.
Yes.
So this is just for me to
Okay.
understand. So great. So we shall begin. So you just look at the camera. And no, you need to come closer.
Oh, okay.
So that you can catch it. So it's 1, 2, and 3. Hi, welcome to the National Queen's Choice Online News. I'm Robin Stienberg. Welcome to my show again. And today we have a very interesting artist who is here in Singapore, making his visit around Southeast Asia, and it's none other than Mr. Mauro Perucchetti himself. Mr. Mauro Perucchetti is one of the most renowned contemporary artists actually in Europe and also now throughout the world. His work is well known for his, for his shapes and sizes and colors, such as the jelly babies, and also the fascination with bullets and cigarettes and even butterfly wings. Mr. Mauro, welcome to our show. And today,
Thank you for having me.
yes, it's truly a pleasure to have you on our show. And most of our audience would like to find out more about your insights on how your journey has been thus far, being a sculptor, artist, and your influence. They're trying to understand how you got your influence from the works of Mauro from the 1960s, and what is your perspective? Was it religion, or was it the spiritual impact that you went through a process that you decided this is something that you want to do? You want to be an artist.
I think that more than saying that I have been influenced by art or other artists, I think I can confidently say that I've been influenced by my own life. I led a rather unorthodox life since I was young. In fact, since an early age, I had to tell my father to stop wasting his time and paying for my school fees, because every time I opened the book, it didn't matter what book it was, to me it was like Harry Potter. Instead of studying the content of the book, I would start fantasizing about the world and the trips that I was going to take and all the things that I was going to do, with very little knowledge, in fact, of what the world was all about or what I was going to do. All I knew is that it was not what I was doing at the time. And so I became kind of rather frustrated and rebellious, if you wish. And then I had a terrible car crash when I was 18 years old, and I nearly died. So I had like a year where I could hardly move, which gave me a lot of time to ponder about my next move. And that is, at the time I was already married, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because it was much too young an age to be married, and already I had a daughter. So basically, when I came out of this, the wheelchair really, I divorced, I abandoned my job, and I took to the streets, really. My father was very kind, and he told me, okay, son, you had your chance to study, you don't want to study. You had your chance to have a good job, as I had a very good job for my age. In fact, I was the youngest person in my firm, and every day I would go to work, wearing a suit and a tie.
So what kind of job were you?
I was working in advertising and marketing, and I didn't like that either. I tried something else very briefly. I definitely didn't like that either, and that in fact was the last time I ever worked for anybody. And my father very kindly gave me an apartment for 3 months, as at the time he was moving to another part of Italy due to his work commitments. And those 3 months ran out so fast, and all of a sudden, there I was. I had what I wanted, which is total freedom, but I didn't have a penny in my pocket, and I didn't know what I was going to do what I was going to do that next. And I had a certain fascination with the movie industry, for example, but I definitely already had a very deeply ingrown fascination with art. In fact, my father always reminds me that even when I was very, very young, I was always doing something with my hands. I was making things, and he gave my wife, my current wife, Lorena, who actually works with me as my PR, a piece of art which I made at the time. I was only like 16 years old, which, bizarrely enough, was made with resin. I made this skull which was floating made of resin, which was floating in resin as well. The skull being slightly less transparent than the resin it was encapsulated in, and so that it looks like a kind of a ghostly shape. And it's amazing. I made that when I was 16. So what's that? 40 years later, I'm finding myself being an artist and making a living with this career, which is a blessing because there are so many talented people out there who never get the chance. And I am instantly recognizable for my medium, which is actually the use of resin, which I have perfected over the years and turned into my signature, let's say.
So
Unwillingly, it just happened.
So it's by accident.
It's kind of by accident because in the 90s I wanted to do in the late 90s I eventually developed a very successful business, and I was so unhappy with my life. And again, I had a sort of a second life crisis, and so I sold my home and I sold my business at the age of 49, 50, and when most people think about retiring, and to finance my art projects. And I was particularly fascinated about a certain topic, and that was cloning, because they had cloned Dolly the sheep, and then after that they had managed to crack the technique to clone mankind. And I thought the thought of it was kind of horrifying. And I decided to do a body of work on the dilemma between cloning and religion, and cloning and medical ethics. And I decided to use the jelly baby as an impersonation of clone mankind. And I think the image itself is kind of, self-explanatory. Obviously, the jelly babies themselves have a very poor kind of definition, so it took me quite a long time to sculpt the jelly babies master as you see it now, the shape as you see it now. And anyway, I decided I did a body of work all based on this subject. The problem is that, of course, I had never worked on that scale with resin before. I had been messing around with on an amateurish level with all sorts of materials. Actually, one of the major businesses I was involved with was architecture and design, and throughout that part of my life I had developed a lot of techniques and materials which became actually adopted by other interior designers and architects, and I used to get, in fact, more business supplying the services to other architects than even doing my own architecture and interior design. And I was living actually a pretty nice, trouble-free life because we were concentrating on a small aspect of the construction industry, and we got flown all over the world to do this kind of fancy projects, so it was fun for me. But anyway, the problem is when I decided to actually do this body work on cloning and the jelly babies, of course I wanted the sculptures to be transparent like the jelly babies are, and colorful, which is actually very much part of the cloning thing, you know, the repetitiveness of that. And to my horror, I discovered that I wasn't able to do it on that scale, and also that nobody else could do it for me, because I started investigating with all sorts of companies around the world, and everybody told me, forget it, you can make things up to a certain size and it's kind of hard enough, but on the scale that you want to do, it's pretty much impossible. So if you want to put a big kind of bag of money on the table, we'll have a go at it, but I can tell you now that it's going to go wrong, and you're going to have to pay for it, and maybe the second time we get it right. But you know, that was, you're talking about astronomical amounts of money. So I gutted the house that I was living in at the time, and I put a lot of muji boxes on the floor and a mattress on top, and I went back to living like a student. So I occupied the top floor of the house and turned the rest of the house into a workshop. I remember having to go to the kitchen, which was still downstairs, and having to climb over kind of machines and molds and things like that. It took me about 5 years, but I managed to crack the system. And also eventually had to give up the use of it because it's bad enough to use with all this, using all these chemicals every day, but I was sleeping with them as well. And it wasn't a very sort of clever thing to do, but I had no choice, and I was so passionate about it. And also, I actually kind of like being fit. I always liked that all my life. And so I was definitely feeling my health and my fitness kind of abandoning me. And eventually I had to move the workshop to a workshop. But it was extraordinary. One day, I was invited to exhibit a couple of things in the Royal Academy of Arts in London. And then finally a couple of galleries noticed me. One of them approached me. They came to see me in my peculiar kind of setup, and they were, positively impressed. And to my shock, they said, "We'd like to give you a solo show." I said, "Wow!" And that's how I had my first big solo show, because which was in 2004 with a gallery in London called Beaux-Arts. And in Portsmouth, which is one of the best places to be, really. And up to that point, I was trying to do everything myself. I was making the stuff, I was trying to market my stuff, I was entering competitions and things like that. In fact, I managed to win a competition. It was a competition for blind art, i.e. art that could be appreciated by blind people. Oh. And I won the first prize. That, I think, is due to the fact that the jelly babies, which is the piece I was doing that I entered, are so tactile, and so it was something very easy for handicapped people to be able to read. And anyway, yes. So slowly, I think it must be. I can just kind of empathize with what these people must feel. They probably touched this kind of chubby character and then got to the face where they touched this big smile on the face. And I think that's why it was kind of popular. But anyway, that's how I started. The Jelly Baby was my first, one of my first sculptures, and the subject of cloning and religion and cloning and medical ethics prompted my first kind of serious focus on something. Because, as I said, throughout my life I've been doing little things, but I couldn't make a living as an artist, so I was doing a bit of this and a bit of that. Earlier on in life I worked in the movie industry, for example, but I never really had enough time to put into just the art. And also, when you're very, very young, at least I'm talking for myself, I found it very difficult to focus on one thing, because there were so many things that I wanted to do and I was interested in, and the only way I was going to find out, as I wasn't going to listen to my parents guiding me or to anybody, was to actually experiment for myself. And I always had the fascination with the art, but I tried the art, I tried sports, I tried the movie industry, and so forth. And eventually it kind of was a full circle. And just to talk about the full circle, the funny thing is, I lived, I was young in the 60s and 70s. So, and I lived in Italy, I lived in California for brief periods of time, and I lived in New York and London. And so I was getting kind of influences from everywhere. And it's very peculiar that I ended up, going back to your original question, I ended up using a jelly baby. So in a way, I did a very pop art thing. I kind of appropriated an image and turned it into a piece of art. The difference the only difference I can see is that pop art in the 50s and 60s was kind of non-conceptual, really. It was just, we know what it is. Everything I do now is actually conceptual. So when people ask me, what kind of an artist are you? I say, I don't know. I do what I do. Maybe somebody after I'm dead is going to look back and decide, oh look, there was this guy, and then there were maybe a few other guys at the same time that were doing, they were getting the same kind of inspirations, and they will label us with a kind of movement. But if you ask me really, if I had to describe what I do, I call it conceptual art, conceptual pop, and that's what I think. But I pretty much say that my influence from Andy Warhol ends there. You know, he used a can of tomatoes, and I used a bag of sweets. But I have a funny story to tell you that you probably like to hear or not, and that is that when I moved to Rome from Milan, trying to seek a career in the movie industry, I went to auditions, but I had very little background in the movie industry. I just had some contacts and friends that insisted that I should have a go at it. And I got a part one day. And my first part was with Elizabeth in a movie called The Driver's Seat, where I had a tiny little part as the driver. I often say as a joke, I could have been not quite as lucky. I got a part as the seat. At least I got a part as the driver. But I had this part in a movie with Elizabeth Taylor and Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was playing a cameo role himself in this movie. Also, I think probably because he was very good friends with Elizabeth Taylor. And the funny thing is, I used to turn up to work every morning in this part that was supposed to last, I don't know, a week. And Elizabeth Taylor never came to work. You know, she was going through a kind of turmoil period, I think, where she was having a romance with Richard Burton. And so my part was extended, because instead of taking a week to shoot my part, it took like 3 weeks, to my delight, because I got paid for that amount of money. And 40 years later, all of a sudden, I am next to Andy Warhol again as what my true spirit really wanted to do all the time. Now I know it. And that is art, because I just had the show in London, in Bond Street with my Elsion Gallery, where I have, the show was called Warhol Perucchetti. So I was exhibited with some things, new things that I've done now, which have a kind of repetitiveness, a bit like some of his prints and things like that. So they showed our two bodies of work next to each other. So from having a small part in the movies such a long time ago, I find myself in Bond Street, London, having my art exhibited next to Andy Warhol's, who's a larger than life kind of figure. And in fact, the gallery decided to take a frame out of this movie And I had a poster of me in black and white of me standing next to Elizabeth Taylor and Andy Warhol when I was very, very young. So it's very funny.
Now, about
It's the kind of story you go and tell your grandchildren, when you grow old.
I wish I was in the movie. About your fascination with compartment parts, pills, butterfly wings, and cigarettes. Are they mainly influenced through Damien Hirst and Sarah Lucas? Because I believe that you worked with them before. Or was
No, I haven't. Actually, I got absolutely nothing to do with the YBA movement in England. Even though I've been in London for a long, long time, I don't have anything to do with them. And I actually, even though I started to work more or less around the same time, kind of in the 90s. But no, I don't have anything to do with that. It's just that I believe, for example, I don't mean to. The last thing I want to do is criticize colleagues of mine, or even what the art is all about. I'm not an art critic, a curator, or a philosopher. I know what I like and what I want to do, and actually I pay very, very little attention to what other artists do, because it just pollutes my mind, it confuses me. And I have so much in my head. In fact, I need to put the brakes on, because if I did everything that I want to do, I would have such a large body of work, and I probably would make myself bankrupt as well. And my poor wife is still waiting for me to buy a house, a dream house, because we live in the workshop still. I like it, by the way, it's not a bad thing, but she doesn't.
No,
I think, just to answer your question about the repetitiveness and things like that, I really have some reservations about conceptual art, for example. There is a lot of contemporary art nowadays that I always use this phrase, it's all concept and no art. I think a lot of people should be more philosophers than artists. Also, there is a lot of shock treatment, where artists seems to enjoy, first of all, showing off their personal lives and their image, which is constructed, if you ask me, and to provoke a reaction. And also, when it comes to actually the work itself, there is very, very little craft, and if you ask me, intellectual substance behind. And as I said, I use this phrase, it's all kind of concept and no art. I still, call me old-fashioned if you wish, but maybe being Italian, I remember growing up in these places or going to museums and things where you see these works of art that leave you in awe. You say, wow, what a beautiful painting, what a beautiful sculpture. You feel the touch of a master, of somebody that was so exceptional at what they do, that they are called masters. Well, I still believe that an artist should have exceptional qualities. So everything I do and everything I will ever do is going to be made to the best of my abilities. I want to make things that are beautiful to look at. They have to be approachable to anybody. I don't want to make things that only 0.5% of people understand, or I would correct that, even bother to understand, because actually the percentage of people who understand this conceptual art is much greater than some of these curators like to think. It's just that they are presented with much fancier words. But we can see what it is, and you can also understand the story, and you can also be still rather unimpressed. So my idea is, I want to make art that is beautiful, I want to use the best of my abilities, and I want people to go, whether you like it or not, say, wow, what a nice piece of art. Or you can see that somebody has put a lot of thinking and energy behind the piece, and that I will never change.
No.
And that's why I do these things as perfectly, and and also the repetitiveness, it's probably an influence in minimalism because there is a side of me who's a bit kind of an engineer and a designer or whatever. I have, I don't know, I must have some Japanese ancestors because I am so zen in my approach to visual kind of impacts.
Now, as an artist, how did you develop, the perception, and because you decided to change the images and perception of evil and destruction into alluring and seductive, pieces of art. Was it because you choose to transform your philosophy, or is it because you want to be different from what other artists who wish to express the way they express?
But first of all, it's actually quite difficult to express something quite that you can talk about all day. Do we talk about war? Do we talk about love? Do we talk about violence? Do we talk about consumerism? You can talk about it all day. So how do you talk about something like that in one shot? So it's quite difficult. And but as I said earlier on, I don't like the shock treatment. So I am never going to use excrements. I can understand somebody like Manzoni in Arte Povera in the 50s selling the famous merda d'artista, which is basically canned poo, because this is just after the war. People had suffered tremendously at that time. People were poor, they didn't have enough to eat, they had seen untold kind of misery, and they were angry. And also it was very difficult to kind of get it's a hard life, as I said earlier on, to actually get noticed and to make a living as an artist. Some people are very talented and never get the chance. So I understand somebody getting that angry in those kind of circumstances. I don't want to, I haven't lived like that. I have had a very unorthodox life. I've had my share of suffering as well, but I have no resentment. Everything I did in my life, I nearly died 3 times.
Really?
I'm not going to go into it. And I'm still here. And I'm still here. I'm not kind of advertising it. I'm not even telling people how to why and what, because I don't want to shock people. It's my business. I have no resentment. Everything good that happened to me, I can thank the gods. Everything bad that's happening to me, I can only blame myself. And I don't have that kind of resentment. So when I try to say something with my art, I want to say it in an aesthetically beautiful way. And that's me. And that's why I talk about war, about death, about consumerism that on some aspects becomes offensive and vulgar. And by all means I'm part of it if you wish as well. But it doesn't matter. We are all in the same pot. So I am not blaming anybody because, as I said, I'm a victim or a use or an instigator of it as well. But I want to do it in a graceful and aesthetically beautiful way. It's not my style to go around headbutting anybody.
No, I have actually observed one of your art pieces, especially the bullets. Is you turn the sculpture of a bullet into something so beautiful.
It looks like a lipstick in a way.
Yes, and that's why I want to ask you, what is your philosophy of art? What is art to you? Because you turn something that's destructive into something that's beautiful, and you've changed the perception. Well,
when I did this body, actually you're talking about something that was a body work that I called Blast, at an exhibition called Blast. It was instigated by the second Iraqi war, when after 9/11 I was one of the many people who felt that something had to be done, and between you and I there was about time to go and kick some ass. And I said, okay, I understand why they are doing this. It's a horrible thing because a lot of innocent people are going to suffer, but that's always the case. And I morally was convinced by the politicians that going into Iraq was one of the, it was just part of a series of things that, in particular the United States, or I would like to say the whole world should have united and made an effort to go and cure a certain problem, which is the problem of terrorism, of course. And it's got nothing to do with religion or where the terrorism comes from. When I lived in Italy, for example, Europe was riddled with terrorism. Remember, Baader-Meinhof, the Munich Olympics, the Red Brigades in Italy. People in the streets of Italy and France used to kill each other because they were either communist or fascist, all the students, and they had absolutely no bloody idea what being a communist meant. In fact, the wealthier they were, the more they wanted to be communist. It was just a rebellious kind of reaction. But as I said, I was morally convinced that it was necessary to do something. And then very quickly we found out that actually a lot of lies were said, and that going into Iraq in particular was the wrong thing to do. I don't know about Afghanistan, again, we have all day to talk about it. Afghanistan was a different story. They were going after Osama bin Laden. But Iraq really had very little to do with the whole thing. So I became a bit upset. And especially because they convinced me, personally, that was the good thing to do. So I felt partly guilty. And I did a body of work on the war. So hand grenades, bullets, a Jesus that looks like a movie star, pulling the nails off the cross and being titled "I'm not taking the shit on anymore," and an AK-47, an icon of the 20th century, and that's why I did this kind of thing. But I did them looking like objects of consumerism, which so often goes hand in hand with wars, really. A lot of wars are generated, instigated by interests, really, whether it's the oil or whatever, or a lot of war are caused by financial greed, really. And so I, again, as usual, I didn't want to use the shock system, so I was talking about something extremely serious indeed, but I tried to portray it in a beautiful way and leave it up to the people, to the viewer, to decide what to think of it. But definitely there is, as I said, these things go into iconic things. How sad is it really that a rifle can become an icon of a generation? It's just quite sick, actually. And as I said, all the dirt and filth that often goes hand in hand with the sort of behind the scenes with going into war nowadays. So I think I am trying to also not only not use the shock system, but have these things looking nearly like toys. There is a kind of a, where is the child? Where is love and the good kind of sense that we all have hidden somewhere.